A lot of people got offended by what I had to say, which is a totally new experience for me. It's an incontrovertible fact that the typical evangelical church of this generation has become weak and womanly. The second reason we know our salvation is secure. Reason number one, God began the good work in you. Reason number two, God is still at work in you.
As fallen creatures, we don't understand what good is apart from God's revelation in the Scriptures. That's why the law was given.
The only thing that really is absolutely trustworthy is the Word of God.
The church has begun to look weak and effeminate, frightened, sissified, like a bunch of fops and milksops. We're supposed to be soldiers.
A eulogy wouldn't be honest without a fair critique of Phil Johnson's fault. And wow, does he have this is... Phil Johnson is not dead, despite what you might conclude from this eulogy. That's right, I'm going to deliver a eulogy, a speaking well of somebody who is alive and well. Why would I do that? Well, it was a few months ago. You may recall this very apparently prominent preacher named John MacArthur. He went to be with the Lord, and there was a memorial service at Grace Community Church. I had the privilege of attending that with Mrs. Friel, and there were so many people there, and there were so many people who loved John MacArthur, and eulogies were being delivered by his two sons, Johnny Erickson Tata, Sinclair Ferguson, all lifting up a man who had contributed much to the kingdom. In other words, they eulogized John MacArthur. Well, when the memorial service was done, Mrs. Friel and I were ushered into a tent. We're just hanging out. And I was watching Phil Johnson, who had just completed his bone marrow transfusions to deal with his multiple myeloma. In other words, life-threatening. He got put through the medical ringer, and now the doctors joyfully are stating, hey, he's definitely on the uptake. Now, he still has multiple myeloma, but they've extended his life for years, and we hope it is a lot of years. Nevertheless, I knew Phil wasn't at full strength. I just know the difference. I've known Phil for so many years, and yet there he was. There he was, on his feet, interacting, acting as a representative, an ambassador for Grace to You and for John MacArthur. And it was then that it struck me, I'm really glad that the Lord saved Phil Johnson's life. Simultaneously, I'm thinking about the eulogies that just took place for a man who could no longer hear them. And I determined, for better or for worse, I'm not going to wait for any of my friends to die, whether they are young or old, to eulogize them, to speak well of them. I think that all of us, and I'm at the front of the line, would do well to identify somebody for whom we're grateful, and why not encourage them now? Why not encourage others by saying good things about another brother or sister? Why not eulogize people now? And so it is, even though Phil is happily in remission, his death, it is not imminent. I just refuse to only speak well of a brother at his funeral. And so I would like now to eulogize, speak well of a man I admire and love dearly, Phil Johnson, because he's been a gift to the body. So here it is. This is the best thing that I can. This is the best. I've thought of a lot of things. Here's the best thing. Am I overdoing it? Here's the best thing that I can say about Phil Johnson. He makes me sick. That's right, Phil Johnson actually makes me sick. You say, that doesn't sound like a well-spoken word, but it is. You see, about 20, maybe 25 years ago, was doing radio, and I discovered, yikes, Phil Johnson listens to the program. And I kid you, it's still, honestly, still, it just makes me go, oh. You got an A-level theologian like Phil listening to you talk about the things of the Lord. It should make you sick, and it did. In fact, it made me so sick. This is my old Bible. I don't know if this is real leather or not. I don't think it is. And inside of this Bible, I've got all the stuff that I used to tote around with me, especially for evangelism. So evolution, here's a Living Waters tract. Wow, I haven't been in here for years. This is like the Tennis Channel bag check, where they grab a tennis player and say, what's in your bag? Well, that's what's in my Bible is what this is. Roman Catholicism, what you need to know. It's still a work-righteous system. I think these are open-air preaching notes. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what these, oh wait, what's this? This is, more Roman Catholicism. You see, being in Minnesota, there's a lot of Catholics and a lot of Lutherans, so you got to be ready for it. But here it is, right here. See this? It's an airplane sickness bag. I was on an airplane, and I saw the airplane sickness bag, and I was thinking about Phil Johnson making me sick. So I grabbed the bag, and I put it into my Bible here so that anytime I talked about Phil Johnson, okay, this was a long time ago, all right, so don't judge too severely, but I would say, hey, I just read that Phil Johnson, Phil, because he made me sick. Why? Because I respect him so much, and he's earned it. The second gift of Phil, there's so many, but how's about his oratory and sermon skills? I'm making a distinction here. Phil's a great preacher, but a man can write great sermons and not be very interesting to listen to. Phil's an amazing writer. I mean, it's just beautiful. When you hear him preach, it's pretty much what he has written. He's a manuscript guy. And it's really hard to pull that off without sounding really kind of like you're reading something. He doesn't do that. So he's written a gorgeous sermon, and then he presents it with oratory skills. It involves verbal, non-verbal elements, articulation, clarity, voice modulation, command of an audience. As you watch this clip of Phil preaching, try to listen on two levels. Listen for the content, because Phil's writing is exquisite. He's a manuscript guy. He writes everything out word for word, and it is gorgeous. It is, wow, it's just his command of the language. The ear-catching words. It's like, oh, that kind of stuck because it's an unusual word choice. And that's one level. And you can write a great sermon, but if you don't have oratory skills, it's like, and vice versa. You got great oratory skills, but you ain't got no content. That isn't good preaching either. Phil Johnson has both. So listen for how he delivers. This is just a snippet of his preaching. The commanding and authoritative tone, which he still possesses after all the treatments for multiple myeloma. Voice, still strong. Commanding. In other words, he preaches. That's the distinction between preaching and teaching. Teaching is disseminating information. Preaching is disseminating information with authority, commanding a response. So listen for his writing. Listen for his oratory skills, the elasticity of his voice, the strength, the modulation. Absolutely amazing.
There is no more common cliche than the cool church with the pastor in skinny jeans who tells people, you've probably never seen a church like ours. And I can't speak for your community, but the community where I live is well salted with hipster churches that have made an idol out of being stylish and culturally relevant. And every one of them is just like the others. And they all insist that they're like no other church. And I think at one time or another, every one of them has hung a flyer on my door to tell me that their church ain't your mama's church. Every one of them wants you to know that they have a kicking band and a pastor with tattoos who sits on a stool instead of standing behind a pulpit, and his sermons are mercifully short. He likes to do movie reviews, and they talk about topics like social justice and global warming and animal rights, and they say their community is full of artists and they love craft beers and creativity. The thing is, they may say they love creativity, but that is not creative. It's trite.
Strong as ever. And frankly, I'm looking at that clip, and it makes me sick. Phil Johnson, it just makes me sick. Why? The multiple myeloma treatments, lost all of his thick hair. It's all grown back. It's not even gray. You make me sick, Phil. Your hair makes me sick. Another gift Phil Johnson has is writing and editing skills. If you've ever read or appreciated one of John's books, well, then you were enjoying Phil. His communication skills, his editing skills, his writing skills, being able to take one vehicle of communication and convert it into another, from oratory, John's sermons, into a book. Trust me, that's a pistol. And he does it magnificently. Millions of books. Yeah, John's contents, Phil's editing, That's no small contribution. Phil's next attribute, there are some who would say Phil is, well, he's kind of strong in the way that he contends for the faith. I agree. He is. And that boldness, especially in today's climate, that can be perceived as being arrogant. I got to tell you, I don't know what eulogy point we're on right now, but one of Phil's attributes, his humility. You go, well, every time I see Phil, he's so bold and he's so strong and he's just unwavering in his convictions. Yeah, right. But that doesn't mean he's not humble. What you're about to see, this just staggers me. That a man with so many skills who could have had his own prominent ministry sacrificed it for the ministry of another. You could have been an evangelical celebrity on the scale of John MacArthur, and you chose the road of supporting that man, which I think is an unsung and uneulogized aspect about you and your life. You have worked behind the scenes more than in front of the scenes. Why did you choose to do that?
Well, that's what I was born to do. It's what I wanted to do. I never wanted to be the guy out front. And in fact, I was at Grace Church here for 11 years with all kinds of opportunities to teach or whatever, but I never taught a group of adults larger than my own living room for the first 11 years I was here. And then was sort of prompted and goaded into teaching adult groups, and I grew into conference speaking and all of that. I didn't intend that, and I don't really crave that sort of notice. But people ask me, why don't you write your own books? And my answer always has been, look, I could write a book that might sell 3,000 or 4,000 copies, and I could call myself an author and all of that, but I could also use those same skills to edit John MacArthur's material and help him with his writing ministry. My book that I wrote that 4,000 people would read would be out of print within a decade. John MacArthur's books are going to be read 100 years from now. It's just a better use of my time. His material's so much better than mine.
Amazing. Yeah, Phil is strong, but he's humble. It might come as a surprise to those who have been the object of his criticism. But if you have enjoyed anything of John MacArthur, it is because Phil Johnson humbly removed himself from the spotlight to shine a spotlight on the work of another man who was shining the spotlight on Jesus Christ because he realized it could have a greater impact for the kingdom. Yeah, it meant fewer followers for him, less notoriety for him. Gave it up. Why? Because he's humble. Now, having said all of that, none of those fine qualities of any man are worth a plug nickel if the man is a phony at home. Well, let's go to the home of Phil Johnson, which, by the way, he opens up all the time. He's not a phony. He's been married for almost 50 years. Come on. You're the real deal. When you've been married that long, okay, I guess some guys, they could have somehow kept a woman in a marriage for half a century. That's a wild exception. You got to be genuine. If your wife is going to adore you after 50 years, got 3 grown kids. They all visit. They bring the 8 grandkids over. In other words, all of the stuff that you see out here about Phil, it's backed up by the stuff you don't see at home and at the church. He's there serving. You probably just don't know this. He's a churchman. That's another attribute of Phil Johnson. He loves the local church. One fine attribute after another that are certainly worth eulogizing. However, a eulogy wouldn't be honest without a fair critique of Phil Johnson's fault. And wow, does he have it's like, wow, how can this be? How can a guy who's so stellar in so many ways, how can he be a fan of the Chicago White Sox? See, we can't all be perfect. Finally, Phil, if you're watching this, you have been such a blessing to I don't know if you know this, but Phil, I'm not talking to you anymore, Phil. Phil is actually, he served as a board member for Fortis Institute. I can call, hey, Phil, I got a question about something. Always responds, always helpful. always willing to do something behind the scenes to advance the kingdom. That's Phil Johnson. But back to you, Phil. I love you, brother. I am so grateful for the privilege of knowing somebody like you. And I genuinely look forward to being in heaven, not anytime soon, but I want to be there with you, and I am quite certain that for all of eternity, you're going to make me sick. Discuss.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for your faithful partnership with us. Thank you for loving the truth. Thank you for proclaiming it the way you do, making sure people know the distinction between what's true and what's not. You do a great job with that, and we're glad to have a friendship with you. Bless you.